think I'm mic'd up pretty good here. Quite an introduction. Yes, 72 was a while ago, but still do our stuff. All right, let me see if I can get this going. Vegetated roofs, and you know who I am. I'm going to talk about, and this will only be about a 20-minute talk. I'm going to try to get through this fairly extensive roofs, the Cleveland Clinic, semi-intensive roofs, University Hospital, you'll see one of that near the Seidman Cancer Center. Intensive roofs, Metro Health, we did one at their cancer building. Pinstripes, Pike and Rose, which is actually a restaurant, and Three Village Condos, and Seneca Niagara Casino is our last one I'll talk about. So just so everybody knows, extensive roofs are really very simple. Sedums, herbs, grasses, and I did bring some sedum. This is my show and tell a little bit here, but I thought everybody needs to really know what sedum is. It's just, you see this growing all the time around here. It grows like a weed, literally, so it's a great one for some of these roofs right now. All right, so let's talk about the Cleveland Clinic Lab.
Okay.
Okay, sure, feel it. Cleveland Clinic, this is the lab. This is a before picture, and this is Euclid Avenue right here. And this was just as the construction was towards the end. You can see the ladder inside, and they're putting up probably the ceiling tiles in this case. Here's what it looks like after, and this is with sedums. You take them, and I'll show you, they're in trays here. It's really a pretty simple installation. The roof is slightly sloping. That's where we get our drainage on it. And this is a close-up of the sedums. This was early on. Haven't really taken a picture lately, but they do get much taller. They bloom, very low maintenance, basically no irrigation. It's whatever falls on it is what happens. So, and this is another picture. As it matures, it fills in. If there's a problem with one of the sedums trays, then we just lift the tray out. And here's the tray. It's a pretty simple installation. There's companies around here that grow these, and you order the trays, you get the mix of sedums you want to use, and just hook them together, and then we leave walkways down between them. So we're calling this a semi-intensive roof. Small herbaceous, which would still be some sedums. Ground covers, grasses, small shrubs, moderate maintenance, and occasional irrigation. University Hospital, if you're familiar, as you're going down Euclid, it's called the CASE Medical Campus. We were the designers on that, the Seidman Cancer Center. There's also a park along Euclid Avenue. So a term I saw the other day, my one intern, Gavin, was searching on the internet, ecotherapy, healing the body by healing the earth. I think that's really what we have with these vegetated roofs, and you'll see what I mean here in just a second. So we designed the park-like area here, the rework of the entry, but this is the Seidman Cancer Center. So the green roof I'm talking about is right there. It's not real big, it's narrow. It overlooks the healing garden we worked on, and gives you a good idea. So this is just a graphic. In other words, this is the garden, this is the healing garden, Euclid Avenue is over here. So it's not very far off the ground. I think it's only about 15 feet wide. And I'll give you a picture. We took approach, more of an oriental garden. I mean, you can do a lot. As far as roof gardens, there can be different types. It's just how you want to approach it and do it. We work with a consultant out of Toronto named Virginia Burt, And she's done a lot of these, and we both teamed up on the design of these. These basically are ornamental grasses, rocks vertically, and these are Mexican pebbles. There is sub-drainage under all these sort of roofs. That's where your mechanical engineer gets involved in this. This is just another picture. And what's important about this garden especially is it's next to, well, the cancer area right here, the infusion rooms. So we were trying to make something, I'll say, that heals the mind, that relaxes you as you're getting your treatment, something to look at. And that was our approach on this. Get something interesting. These are the Mexican pebbles. So I guess I could say not everything is vegetated on some of the roofs we do. We just like the look of them. They come in different colors, but we do use black a lot. Obviously, when it rains, the water flows through them. It's picked up underneath in our drainage systems. So this is looking from an infusion room, looking out into the garden area. And then you're seeing a little bit of the healing garden that's over here, that's depressed. This is Euclid Avenue right here, and Case Campus is mainly right over here. I'm sure Chris recognizes this one. Yeah, you know exactly where I'm at. So they were so anxious, being UH, even as the building was being finished, and we weren't quite done with the garden, they were already giving patients infusions in these rooms, and it was like, hurry up, get done, get out of the way. So we only got a couple pictures. They wouldn't let us take pictures once they were doing an infusion. So it's very hard to find pictures, but it's turned out very nice. Intensive gardens, vegetation, herbaceous, small trees, maintenance, and irrigation. So we're going to talk about mental health, which I would also call that ecotherapy. This is just, we do a lot of freehand preliminary layout plans prior to doing any construction documents or final approval. But we looked at a little pattern. You know, people will probably be walking around with an IV. They need sitting areas, they need shade. There'll also be family members there. So we try to pick up that in our designs. And you know, there's some shade structures. And you have to be very careful what you use, that it's clean, it's not going to cause infections. You kind of got to know your plants pretty good. Some plants are poisonous. You never know if somebody's going to, you know, if there's a little child out there, if they're going to bite it, so the taxes will get you sick. So we watch that all the time on our plant selection. So, just saying, what is this? Well, this is what we had to start with. It had these big pavers. I think they're about 24 by 24. We're over a parking garage on this one. So there is a membrane under this that was still holding the water. It was not dripping down, supposedly. So, but all the goop and stuff that fell through the cracks really made a mess on this. These are the pedestals that the, I'll say, the tiles sit on. So that was what we started with. We had to lift a lot of those up, not we did, the contractor. This is what it looked like when we started. Pretty awful. This is the connection. The cancer area is over here. Infusion is over here too. And pretty stark, I'd say. So your vegetated roof can do aesthetics. They can do, you know, relaxation of the mind. They can do stormwater management. And just something nice to look at. It's almost like taking a rain garden, which we do a lot of those, and sticking it on the roof. You can get pollinator plants in there, which is a big thing right now that I think landscape architects have been doing for years, but now it's in the headlines. So We always try to do that. So you can see these were these standing, really ugly planters that were there, concrete. So we faced them with wood. We trimmed the tiles, made sure the drainage was working underneath, soil into them. But this is the same view. Let me go back here for a second. That's the same view. All right, look at what we did there. So we get trees in there. We try to use trees that will not get too much out of scale. In other words, get too big. And here's another one. Those are those planters I just talked about. This is a before picture. Pretty ugly. I don't know. This garage is fairly old. I think done in the early 70s. I guess it was a style back then. Here it is now. Pretty much the same view with those surrounded in wood. We do have plants that have come up since then. These pictures are about a year old. And you can see the background here of the pathway areas. There's a little more detail. I believe we had some sedums in here. Sedums come in different color. A lot of our projects, or basically most now, use what's called a bioblend, which has haydite and I'll say organics in it. And we even now, we're doing a project down here. Here, pass that around too. It's just real fine. We're doing a project just down the street here for Cleveland Financial over their garage. It's fairly large. We're going to use a lot of haydite. It's lightweight, so we're always watching weight on these. And most of the time, one of the first people we talk to is the structural engineer, especially if we're going to have spot loads. For example, those big ugly planters you saw, those were in the key spots because they related to the structure underneath the garage. So that's one of the first things we look at to see where we can maybe put a tree. Anyway, it's always a fun part of it, sort of. This is just another picture of the garden, glass, and people can look in. We use some grasses, and then here comes your pollinator area. And we get benches in there pretty clean. This is a real simple one. We try to keep it simple. Just another view. And this has been very successful. The patients love it. The families love it. So I think that's the goal. You're really designing for the people that use it, not for your ego. And of course, I don't have any ego, so it's not a problem. Anyway. Just once more, just another picture of it. And all right, we're going to talk about this one. Pinstripes, and as I've explained some people before, is a high-end restaurant with bocce ball and bowling, bars, drinking, fire pits. We're working on them all over the country right now. And we are having one going in at Pinecrest, if anybody's familiar, out in Orange there, the big project that's going up. We're involved in that. And I don't have a bunch of pictures. We just had call it a fire call yesterday that they were trying to put the plants in, and I rejected all the plants. So we had to have them shipped from Ohio to get the right plants in this. So it was a real fire drill. But what I wanted to point out, this one is for water quality in the area there, Bethesda. So any impervious surface, new impervious surface, has to offset that impervious surface with water quality. And how they did it here, I don't have a picture of the third story. That's all one big green roof, but we do have one. This is the second floor. This is a green roof that was mandated. There was no choice. So the developer did have to pay for this. The top one, it's interesting, the building is built by a landlord. The restaurant comes in and they become the tenant in the building, but they were still responsible. These are just small rain garden areas where we put these sorts of plants in. We had some of the Japanese maples, some more sedums, some more grasses. The idea is to get a lot of color, and there's also fire pit areas out here. So this was the first time I'd really run into water quality being required on a project, which would go along with our sewer district now and might be a way to counter some of the fees you get. So hopefully this will catch on. This is just a typical, these are plugs, just small plugs that were put into the soil for the rain garden. Well, not the rain garden, excuse me, the roof garden, which is just about like a rain garden. And it has sub-drainage. And we usually work either with a company on the drainage, and you get your mechanical engineer, your civil engineer, everybody gets involved in the drainage. And it's not that complicated once you know how to do it. So, all right. Three Billy's condos, that's over off of Cedar, or actually Green Road. And I thought I'd throw something different here. This is on top of a roof, actually a parking garage. And we were called by the parking garage engineer. We've done a couple projects with them. And this is an area of what has been put in. This originally was just all concrete up here, and they wanted some green space for the people. This is what it looked like when we started. And I'll just go back. This is what it is now, and this is what we had to deal with. So there was drainage worked into this already on top of the garage. And the end result is, this is very simple. Grass area, a few trees. Trees will grow here. There's always, we had to come up with a way to stabilize those trees. We did this at Cleveland State, where we take a couple boards underneath and rest the tree on it, and then any hooks go into the board so the tree's own weight keep it in place, because you do get wind loads up here. And once again, there's just another picture. So I think that's a big improvement over what was there in the garage, and it gives a really kind of a pleasant place for people to walk.
Hey, Greg, can I ask a quick question? Can you go back one slide? So how deep is that growing medium?
This is probably about 16 inches.
Yes, that's not a lot for a tree.
No. Well, the trees we do a little deeper. And I'll tell you, the one in Maryland, we're actually doing pots. We're getting metal pots that are about this deep. Because it's a tough area for trees to grow. So sometimes we do mound it up, to answer your question on that.
Thank you.
All right, Seneca Niagara. This is my last slide here. Once again, this is over a rooftop. Parking garage is under it, and offices are under it. I don't know whether anybody's been there, but it was pretty awful looking. So this was just a little quick aerial sketch we did. This whole facility is owned by the Seneca Indians. So if you're familiar with Indian tribal areas, they have their own rules and regulations. They're really an independent nation right there. So it was kind of interesting. Didn't really need permits or anything like that. They cut all the red tape out, so it was kind of beautiful work for them. And I mean, they use reason, but we have to go to planning commission? Nope, just do it. So they're not bothered. So this was a fun job. It is. Just think about what we go through now to get things approved. And it's a real hindrance, I think, with all the, I'll say, red tape we have to go through. This is actually a spot where the tourists can stand. You see all these are really Indian, they're feathers right there. And this is the entrance. And this is kind of before how this looked. And I'll give you a picture right after this. But not very inviting, and I think they realize that. And they draw people from all over. So there it is after. So there's before, and there's after. So we reworked it. And Cindy, to your question, there's depth of soil in these for sure, yeah. And you'll see other areas on this. But here's, once again, before. Keep your eye on this. That's your key. If anybody's been to Buffalo, that's right in their kind of town square there. This is what people were walking in, and they get tourists all over, from all over the country. Pretty awful. And once again, recognized it. So this is the same view. There's the tower. And what we did, structurally, we were able to do this. We worked closely with the structural engineer where we could lay walls out. We do staggered walls. The trees, there is good soil, a lot of soil under those, and there's drainage. On this one, we did the lighting too, and some of the others we do the lighting. So if you remember that first view I had, I should probably put the slide is first, where we had the area where the tourists could come and get their picture taken. So this is how this looks now. There's the Seneca, there's the feathers, and we just did curvilinear walks, a lot of grass, there's a lot of plantings too. Just some sequencing of spaces, trying to break a big space up. And that's what the function of this vegetated garden was, to give some scale to the space, to give some texture, to give some color, and make it user-friendly, make it friendly for the tourists or the gamblers, make them want to come in and gamble, just like that. So, just another view. This is the walkways, they come up. And once again, a raised planter. There's another shot back to the entryway in it. So it's sort of screened. You have to find your way a little bit, but I think it's really a nice relief the way everything happens. So that was my last slide. So, yes?
If you could go back one slide.
All right.
Just as an example, those concrete curves that you've got decorated around there, if you say that's on a structural deck, do you have to connect to the deck or float them?
Float them.
Just on the sand bed?
I can't remember whether it was on the sand bed or whether they just went down. I mean, there is a membrane under here, so,
right.
Oops, let's try this again. Oop, there you go, Mark. Hit the wrong button there. I'm not sure on that question. Actually, my partner was the prime on this. He was up there a lot. I should have probably thrown in a couple more construction pictures, but there was no puncturing. I know that.
Thank you.
Okay. So, oh, there you are.
Any other questions for Craig?
You might have.
No? Yeah, back there. Craig, one question back here.
All right.
In terms of climate impact, how would a green roof compare to putting rooftop solar on your building?
Rooftop solar?
Yes.
Two different items.
I mean, in terms of how much carbon is sequestered by the green roof versus how much carbon you don't have to produce because you're using solar energy, how does that compare?
Well, you're saying just the carbon from the plants? Is that what you're saying? I mean,
Yeah.
we've cut out
They
concrete.
produce carbon,
Pardon me? Yeah.
and because they absorb it, and the rooftop solar would prevent you from needing to burn coal. Or
Yeah, but to make the rooftop, they use their carbon. You know what I'm saying? They're a carbon user. To make the, why don't you answer that?
Craig, I
That's
can
your-
help Craig with that. I actually do have a couple of slides, actually just one on that integration of photovoltaic and vegetated roof systems. Germany pioneered that, studies in the 90s, and basically the integration of the two is a mutual benefit to both photovoltaics, which increases their efficiencies, and it helps the green roof actually exist in a couple of different reasons. The carbon studies on sequestration of vegetated roof systems are out in the literature, but it depends on what you're planting in there. So if you're doing trees, you're going to store some. All that stuff is going to be temporary for a certain amount of storage. And I think the goal is to try to figure out how to do both of them together. Sorry. Does that answer your question? And if you've got more questions on that, sidebar me later.
Thank you very much.
Because it's a great question, because it doesn't need to be a competition between green roofs and PV.
Great. Any other questions before we pass the baton? Yes, Joe.
Just as a follow-up, is the goal carbon sequestration on a green roof, or is it mitigating heat and energy?
It's a great question. It's really a balance of multiple benefits. I'll just say this right away. Green roofs don't do one thing extremely well. They do several things, a bundle of things, fairly well. And so you combine those kind of benefits together.
Okay, so just before I get started, are there any landscape companies in the room this morning? Are there any actual building owners? Just to kind of get a feel of kind of who the audience is, it's helpful. And are there architects in the room? Okay, so it's helpful kind of going into some of this. So the focus of my presentation is going to be more of the actual installation, the fundamentals of what actually happens once the architect plans it, once the general contractor has bid it out, the work's been awarded, what actually happens on a day-to-day basis, or what you can expect to see on the roof. But before you can talk about vegetative roofs, most people use the term green roofing. And in our roofing world of the primary focus of what the roof serves, the membrane color is a driver of what can be considered green. And the idea of a white, tan, or gray roof have some of the same benefits as you start to talk about the carbon and some of the heat island effect. What can reduce the heat on the roof surface? So in our area, having a light colored roof can help reduce the heat on the surface of the roof. That also can extend the life of the membrane by not having the same degradation from the UV. In a roof installation, if the insulation on the roof is still sound and dry, there's really not a need to remove it, pay for the dumpster costs associated with that, and then install new insulation. So if the insulation on the building is dry and reasonable, we recommend that you keep that and then add more insulation on top to increase your R value. So recycling and reusing what's there is important. Adding a little bit more insulation, whatever the standard is today, tomorrow the standard is going to be higher, so if your budget allows. Insulation is a relatively cheap component of the overall roofing system, but it can dramatically reduce both your air conditioning costs and your cooling costs for large facilities. Skylights, as you know, can provide natural lighting. We're starting to see wind turbines. Solar panels can also go on top of the roof and be considered in the green, and then as well as the vegetative system. So in my world of roofing, those are the things that we encourage and recommend just as much as an actual living green roof. Not knowing exactly what each of the speakers we're going to be talking about this morning, these are some of the things that you can kind of sell a building owner on. Why should you put a vegetative roof on? It slows your water runoff. And the studies, depending on where you are, how thick the soil is, it can be up to 75% of the water runoff. It can provide environmentally friendly surface, just like we saw with the cancer. It's beautiful. In our world of ugly, dirty old roofs, it's not quite as appealing, but you can't forget the functional aspect that they serve. Putting the vegetative over the roof membrane keeps the roofing membrane at a constant temperature. Built-up roofs that are more of the old-fashioned of tar and gravel, plies and hot asphalt. One of the things that drives our business is the high heat in the summer and then the freeze and thaw in the winter. And those temperature variations are what actually split the roof. So that is a driver in our business for maintenance, but replacing it with vegetative over top can keep some of those things from happening. The ultraviolet can't penetrate. There's some talk in some cities about what the stormwater costs are, and I know we have a representative that can answer some specific questions. The heat island effect. My husband is actually a small aircraft pilot, and when he is flying in for landings, you can notice the turbulence if you go over large, big box commercial properties where the heat from the asphalt and from a black roof can actually affect a small aircraft as they come in for a landing. And I felt it firsthand, and I was really surprised, but they do instruct pilots on that. So it's a real thing that affects people. And it can help control the sound. So in downtown properties, some of the external sounds. If there is a fire, the vegetative system will slow the burn. It can control some of the spread of a fire from tenant to tenant. And then, of course, there's always the potential lead value that can be achieved. So as you look to decide, is your roof ready for plants? And if you could design the perfect roof, it would have a concrete deck. It would also have tall parapet walls. I think that if I could send a little pitch to architects as a roofer, we like high parapet walls for the element of safety. If you're going to put a vegetative roof on it, the idea is that people are going to be using that space, and that the well-being of a person's safety should be considered in all of this, in the overall design, so that it complies not only with OSHA for the installation, but for people when they're actually using it. A typical roof membrane system that would have your roof ready for plants would have the insulation, high-density cover board, which is a little bit more firm, that would go over that insulation. Then your membrane, a reinforced membrane is also preferred. Fully adhered, so that means your seams are taped or double taped. There's then some typical barrier between the roof membrane, that's the waterproofing, and the actual plants. And that could be a slip sheet, which is just a very thin membrane, or it can be some of the filter fabrics or drainage mats. So very quickly, I'm going to go over my version of a contained versus a loose system. A contained system means that it's in a plant or tray of some sort. They typically carry a 1-year plant warranty. It's very efficient on the installation process. It's a little bit fast. So with speed comes a little bit of savings to the building owner. So as you look at the cost of the vegetative systems, a contained tray system, in my experience, has been cheaper to install. If a leak occurs, it's very easy to lift a couple of trays to find the hole and patch the hole than it is to excavate an entire loose system. And in our world of instant gratification, it's 100% complete and it looks great the day that it's installed. The disadvantages are there's just constraints of the sizing. And in our region, we're kind of capped with what our growing season will allow. And all of the growers in our area require 50% of the money down. And in the construction world, that's an unusual thing. Normally in construction, you get paid after your job is done. So that's why it's important to have a good contractor involved who can help you with that process and not require that of you before you receive your product. Okay, so this was an architect in Cleveland in 2008. It was a fully adhered membrane and a grid system on a 3-story house on the near west side. And this is, it was kind of like a tutorial of how it looked. These were 2x2 planters that were lifted to the roof with our crane on a pallet. You can see that the roof membrane is black, and then that there's a fleece slip sheet between the roof and the pavers. You always have to keep your grid systems lined, and so it's important that your starting points are known before you get going. But you can see how it falls into place pretty quickly. When there's the day of the installation, they decided to add a bathroom because the inside of the house wasn't yet finished. So even though the entire roof was slated to be green, there was a plumber on site during the process. So in my world, those are the unexpected that happen pretty regularly. he couldn't quite tell us exactly where it was going to go. So this shows you, you kind of just have to plan and give him a little extra space. And then we just left it with that gravel around it. Now, I think these are rather unimpressive, but the architect was thrilled with the sedums. It was a monolithic, so it was only one variety, and they needed quite a bit to grow in. But it was somebody who felt it was an asset to his construction project. So I think we've come a long way since then. This was at Cleveland Botanical Gardens, and some of the other factors that all of us need to consider are the crane load capacities. Cranes are very integral in our business for lifting, but lifting over parking garages, lifting in work areas, busy streets that need to be shut down for temporary access are the realities. We had to actually move these across 2 roofs to get to the lower roof areas. And the ladies who spoke this morning, I gathered that you like that civic involvement and people involved. The Botanical Gardens wanted volunteers involved in this project. So we needed to have like the roofers alongside with the volunteers so that the roof membrane stays intact, so that people recognize the real hazards of working on a roof. If you're 30 feet in the air, we all need to follow the OSHA rules, and to keep people safe is a necessary component, especially if the community is going to be involved. So these trays also go in very quickly. This brand is called Live Roof, and they have male-female corners, so they set in really tight next to each other. The little bits of white right here are called soil elevators, so they keep the trays from opening completely before they're installed. So once they're installed, you pull the soil elevators out, and the plants go right into each other very nicely. This is a case. This was installed last summer, so just to show you some progression, you can see that this customer highly values safety. They have a strong standard, and with these low parapet walls, you have to have anchor points, but very few customers put anchor points in for the people going to be maintaining this surface. So when you talk about things that the customer wants and things that the customer needs, the installation process and the actual maintenance require planning in this capacity. So there was a fully adhered rubber roof below this. These pavers act as an access point because you're really not to walk on the paver systems of the green grid plants when you're installing them. So we needed to have this access point. This is the installation process. You can see them working right to left. When there is an unusual size that you need to fill, you just cut the trays, and you can see the saw behind them right here. But all of this loose stuff really needs to get cleaned up to avoid punctures to the membrane. All of the cut edges need to go on the inside. You can see them cleaning here. Another thing that this customer also values is the maintenance. And right here, there is water access. So having a plumber involved to ensure that there is water access is really important. And not being an expert in the sedum varieties, anybody can see right here that there is quite a nice variety. It's advertised to come with 5 to 7 different types of sedum. And one of the reasons for that is it's survival of the fittest. If it's not getting enough water, another sedum will take over and fill in some of that space. But it also allows for the roof to flower at different times of the year. So in the spring, you'll see a yellow flower. Midsummer, you'll see pinks. It just allows for different height differences too. Okay, a loose system. We've had fewer experience with loose systems, but we have. There's more options, as you can assume, guess, but it is more labor intensive. So this project was a low-income senior housing in Akron, where it was an 8-story building, and then in front of that 8-story building was a workout room and like community room, so all of the residents could overlook a view that was just a dirty old roof that never looked nice. So this was a complete aesthetic reason that they did this for the residents. So this was a white membrane, and the filter fabric is a barrier between this drainage net. I should have brought a copy of it, but it has like little cups in it. So it kind of acts as 2 layers of fabric plus then a plastic layer of cups. The edging system that will keep everything contained. This is the actual irrigation system that will feed and keep the plants hydrated. So these are called super sacks of soil, and a crane is actually holding that sack in place, and it takes 3 guys to kind of spread the load around while the crane moves. So as you can see, while, in my opinion, landscapers are capable of this, the typical landscaper that gets hired on projects to do a loose system isn't used to working with a crane. I mean, they're used to working in people's yards, at least the landscapers that we've run into on the routes. The hardest thing is when you go back and look, there's some potential, especially in the drip, in this early stage of damaging the roof. And if somebody's not educated in waterproofing components, and they damage the roof, and even if they don't know that they've damaged the roof, it can cause headaches for years down the road. Because it sometimes takes a longer period of time for the water to get into the building. Sometimes it's fast. But having a knowledgeable roofer on site can save you a lot in the long run. We've seen on 2 major projects we've been involved with the roofing portion. Landscapers were in the process of installing the edging system, and they drove 12-inch stakes into the roof. Just hit it as if they were hitting, you know, in a yard somewhere to hold and retain something, not really knowing that they put a huge hole into the roof membrane that was going to be catastrophic 3 months down the line. And the first person that they'll call when there's a problem with leakage is the roofing contractor. This is a brand of commercial roofing, vegetated roofs called COSE. It's a slow drip irrigation. You might be familiar with in our yards that they've changed sprinkler heads from the spraying kind to a slow drip, a trickle drip where you use less water. It's more effective, and there's less that's lost as it just sprays. So there's actually 2 layers of growing media on this roof, different types of materials. This project, like many construction projects, experienced delays. So the plants were shipped to us, because once you put your money down on the plants, they guarantee your ship date. So these plants were shipped to us, and then we needed to keep them alive in their grid system for 3 months. And it wasn't planned, and you can't change it, but in our warehouse and in our yard, we don't have the capacity to store extensive amounts of things that need to be able to see the sunlight, that need to be able to get water. So when you start to think about how you're going to store these once a project gets delayed and really take good care of them, it's a surprise. There was a landscaper involved on this project, and you can see that this is not allowed in the general construction industry. But those are some things that we see. So these little plants, if you can see him in his hand, he has several in his hand all at once, and he's just planting the plugs. So this was the day of in picture 12. Again, there's not a lot of it doesn't look complete to the average person, but 1 year later it really grew in nicely. But the key here was they had a full-time facilities manager who was accountable for watering it and for weeding it on a regular basis. They were on a twice-a-year fertilizing schedule, and they did it. Another project that is also a loose system, but a very small modified system, was at the Strongsville building that they just built And this was what the whole tower overlooked. It's their MRI area. And there's 4 to 6 inches of this media that's spread over the roof. So in my heart, this makes me sad that these plants had to come all the way from Washington State. And the person who controls that is either the building owner, the general contractor, or the architect. And we really value our local distributors that are in the Cleveland area, just outside of Sandusky. There's dozens of them. We enjoy using those those suppliers. These plants came overnight shipped in an air conditioning truck. So I know this group values how silly that can be, but not everybody does or understands. This also comes in like a pizza box, as you can see. So this is a really low roof area. You can see how the plants come to the roof and different things that you need to protect. They really just get popped into place. There's quite a bit of waste that then can get recycled here. There's a little bit of plastic in between. But it goes on pretty quick. And you can see how happy a customer could be once this is done. Again, another thing is unavoidable. The MRI machine was being installed at the same time. And the physicist came out to say that the MRI had a radiation leak. So they stopped their process, thankfully. And we were to stay 10 feet back from where they isolated the leak to be. That was something we hadn't experienced before. With loose systems, there is this electronic field vector mapping, which is installed after the roof. You install this field vector mapping that helps you pinpoint where leaks can be in the roof in a systematic way. There is a third-party representative that does the vector mapping if you suspect there is a leak, and they can show you a drawing of your building and where they identify the breakdowns to be. So not to be redundant, but we think that having a roofer involved in your vegetative roofing is really important. And we're happy to be a resource to you even if we're not involved in your project. You can't deny that somebody's safety is important. And while it's a hat I also wear in our operations, it can't be undervalued. You never want to see somebody get hurt on your building. But to be knowledgeable about the construction project is also important, and to know how vulnerable the roof can be if it's compromised. Understanding the roof loading is also important, and how to get materials to the roof and then to maintain it. Okay, so for building owners that we see spec out a green roof, or architects spec it out, it seems to be one of the first things value engineered out as other costs seem to be going over, where they want it initially, but it's just so darn expensive. So what can you do to kind of offset that? Having a loose stone or ballast system involved, stone is relatively inexpensive compared to the vegetative. The pavers, while they might not be as beautiful as the green, serve a great purpose in providing access to the area. It also allows for unobstructed water flow. You need the water to get off the roof. That's very important in the roof system. It also keeps the overburden of dirt from getting to the flashings. So if you control how big your green roof is, you're recognizing that one of the main places a roof fails is at the transition on the walls. And so if you keep the green away from there, you have access to those walls. So simply put, if you reduce the vegetative footprint slightly, you can reduce your overall cost. So these are just ballparks, because everybody kind of wants to know how much does it really cost. You know, every roof is different, every access is different, every location is different. But just to let you know that the average new roof costs somewhere in this range of $7 to $10 per square foot. Really average roof, really average cost, okay? The single ply membrane does not weigh very much. It's a very lightweight material. Built up roofs, so with more of the old-fashioned plies with hot tar or with a modified system do weigh more. They're 5 to 8 pounds. So when you look at the loads, that's important to consider on what you're going to put over it as well. A new roof that requires an old roof to be torn off, as you can expect, it's more labor, it's more dumpster fees, so it costs a little bit more. So those are like just the roof. But if you're going to put green over it, you need to know that every roofing manufacturer, so not the installer, but the person's product, requires approval to put vegetative over their roof. They need to know about it before you just do it, or it will void your warranty. Okay, so the average cost of a vegetative system can cost anywhere between $20 and $30 per square foot. It goes higher, and it definitely goes higher, but it can go lower as well. And then the average weight of a container system, this is their standard tray, is 27 and 29 pounds when it's fully saturated. Does anybody have any questions for me? Yes.
Yeah, with vector mapping, we've had various debates with our clients about whether it's worth it or not. I'd like to know if any of the panelists have any experience with, how do I say, chasing or diagnosing leaks with or without vector mapping compared to contrasting.
So the example that I gave you where the landscaper drove spikes into the roof, they had vector mapping on that roof. And it was unbelievable how they could pinpoint with accuracy. It costs a little bit more initially. It kind of frees that question of whose responsibility is it, because it's a third party that does the probing, and it's the third party that's identifying where the breakdowns are.
Is there ever a problem with depletion of soil through drainage or wind or anything like that?
You know, not that I've experienced where the soil actually disappears, so to speak, or it needs to be replaced. If the sedums are grown in fully, that should be some of your protection. And in some of the maintenance, I know they're going to talk about, you actually cut down the sedums periodically during the year, once or twice a season. And just like you're cutting your grass, if you let your cuttings go back into the soil, they actually regenerate and repopulate themselves. It's its own fertilizer, and but that's also another thing. If they break off, or they can grow little legs and grow into other areas. So that's why some of those protectors are really important too.
With regard to older roofs, they were facing any experience with asbestos-containing materials, membranes, or
With the roofing?
yeah.
Yes, we definitely are an asbestos-approved contractor. And so each individual member involved in the asbestos removal has to be trained, and that training has to be current. Yeah. Yes?
Question with the trade roof systems, do they come up year after year with the harsh winters?
Yeah. The tray system that we have on our roof was installed in 2010, in the spring of 2010, and in reality we have two sections, one that we maintain and one that we don't maintain. Maybe it's our roof, but they're doing similarly. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So you work with all different manufacturers of roofing material. I know you mentioned Carlisle.
Right.
So explain a little bit about the warranty being approved, right, and then maintaining that warranty over 20 years. So where did they cut off the difference between the roof and the green part for the manufacturer to feel comfortable?
So somebody like Firestone, Carlisle, or JM, when the roofing contractor says, we have been awarded a project, we fill out the details of that and submit it to them. They review it, and as long as it follows their roofing guidelines to have vegetative go over it, which has a higher standard than just your roof. If you follow all the rules, it gets approved. They come out after the roof is installed, and they'll either do, with the roofing contractor, do a flood test of the roof, or the vector mapping is on. The inspection process before the vegetative goes on is pretty significant. But in order for them to okay the vegetative on top of the roof, it has to be known about before the project starts.
So after the roof is down, the normal inspection from the manufacturer comes out, they do a little bit of extra.
Oh, definitely, yeah. In a typical roofing inspection, they will field check several areas, but in a green scenario, they'll take this little hook probe and go down every single seam, every single corner. They don't miss anything because they're concerned about it just as much as we are.
And one other thing, you've got some experience with this, so you being doing the maintenance, right?
Right.
So what's, after it's been on for a few years, what have you seen as far as maybe, some of the nightmares that you can run into or problems?
If you look at just the plant component of it, they don't get enough water, they don't get weeded, and, those two things are just simple routine things. So some type of irrigation system, even if it's not built in initially, we all go through drought spells. So when there is a drought, to water it. And the other thing is to pull the weeds, because weeds can get to be, 4 feet tall.
What about even roof maybe failures? Or, maybe you'd have to go out and do repairs, hunt down repairs.
So that kind of speaks to favoring a little bit of the container system, because if there is a roof failure, part of the green roofing can be removed easily, but also when it's put back in place after the repair is done, you really can't tell that anything had been done that day to the roof. So you can fix the problem and aesthetically make it look like everything's just fine.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Working with the roofing manufacturers, can the manufacturer's warranty be extended in most cases because reduction of solar on that roof?
What we have seen is they might look at it from a different perspective. If the average roofing warranty is 20 years, the assembly required puts you at a 30-year warranty. So it does extend your life, but mostly based on the details that you do to the roof that isn't a direct result or indirect result of the green on top of it.
Does the manufacturer recognize
They haven't broadcast that if they do. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Could you back up the slide once, because that was a very good slide.
Sure.
The costing and weight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. That was wonderful.
Cindy asked me to say a few words on the owner's perspective, on how we feel. So I've only been an owner for, let's say, 4 years. So it's a 4-year perspective on my front. So I want to talk to you about, give you some examples on campus, and we'll talk about the benefits, and then we'll talk about our duties as an owner. This first project, Mandela Schools of Applied Social Sciences. The project that was finished in 2016, it was done by DLR, which is Westlake Reed. They did renovation work to it. We do have a small roof garden, which you might see from Margaret's, that we are the owner she was referring to on that project. So it's a 500 square foot roof garden. You can see there's the tie-offs here. It's received very well. On the inside of the space is a gathering space for students. So they sit there, they relax, they're able to connect with nature outside, or they're actually on the 3rd level, not the 2nd floor, but the 3rd level. So it's been well received. The photograph to the right was taken right after installation. The photograph to the left was taken a couple days ago. So you can see that the sedums are doing very well. It gets medium sun, it's not a full sun exposure, so that helps out with the watering. We've got to water a little bit, but for the most part it's been great. No leaks, it's been fantastic. So. The next one is also in the MSAS family. It's further down the street on Bellflower. This project was done in 2007, and it's actually an intensive green roof. So this image here shows it. It's 800 square feet, and you can see by the plantings, you got the Sylvia here, you've got Japanese maple, you have an evergreen. This all lives. So this is actually a fairly deep system. I'm not going to get into the system anatomy. You can talk about that in a little bit. but it's been fantastic. No leaks, a little more maintenance because the plants are a little larger, so the seams. Everybody likes it. On the inside of that space, to the left here, you see a little deck. Further in, this is an academic office floor, so they have their kitchenette, their kitchen area, and it's an extension of that. It's just a really fantastic little space. If you ever get a chance to go on campus and get up in there, just go take a look at it. A project that's will be 2 years completed this fall is the Stephanie Tubbs Dome Residence Hall that Noemi has completed. We do have a couple of small little roof areas. Again, with budgets, everything has to be weighed and looked at. But because these were high exposure areas, ones you see from other parts of the building, we decided to introduce little green roof areas. You can't quite see it, but we have to get at some of the weeding here, because there are a couple ones that are sprouting up. But for the most part, this is doing well. And then probably the largest example, kind of the grand roof garden on the campus is the Tinkham-Beale University Center down in 16. This was done by Perkins and Will. It's 30,000 square feet of extensive green roof area. This is the outline of the building. It does have a leak detection system. There's a 156 panel photovoltaic array on the roof as well. This would kind of be like the poster child for green roofs. We do have standoffs, irrigation. There was spigots up there with hoses. I'll show that in a couple slides coming down. Initially, for the first year, Costanza, we set our grounds. They were up there, the crew, 4 hours a week. The first year, periodically. Now he's backed off, and he's doing monthly, maybe a couple times a month, going up there with the crew, handling the weeds, making sure it's properly watered and such. But again, they're pretty good. There's basically one leak, but that was isolated, and I don't think they used the detection system on that because they knew where it was coming from. On the inside, they were able to see it. What's interesting about this, though, is, so this will orient you if you know part of where campus is. Your several halls down in here. This is the KSL Library. This is Freiberger Field, the old Cleveland Institute of Art site. This is actually a green roof, which probably people don't know, because below this is a 2-level parking garage. So it's been that way for more than 15 years, and very successful, I might say. So we kind of saw this project as an extension, a raising up of that green roof piece. If you're out there on campus now, we're undertaking a greenway project. So all this is taken up, so you can start to see the what's going on below grade there too. It's pretty neat. So one of the benefits of a green roof, I think Margaret covered a lot of them. It expands the roof life without question because you don't have the UV degradation of the membranes. It's definitely something you consider because there's a cost life cycle balance there. Reduces heating and cooling loads. It acts as an insulator. Stormwater management. We do have some here from the sewer district. Maybe that'll be touched upon later. I don't know if you're going to handle that in your conversation or not. But when you look at it, in total, you have a very large campus. And when you have assessed for stormwater management, a green roof could be a great option to help reduce some of those costs. Improve aesthetics. This is a big one, especially for me. Often I see a green roof, since we have many buildings on campus with multiple heights. If you're able to look down on it, it then becomes the 5th facade. So we always talk about the 4 facades in the building, but really when you're looking down, you see that visual clutter. You really don't want to see dark membrane, sorry, but you really want to see something green. Perhaps pavers are used or stone ballast, but stone ballasts they're good, but it's really hard to try to find leaks there too. So if you have a problem with the roof, they can be more problematic than a trace system. The trace system is actually very friendly for leaks with a leak detection system. So I would say that's a very important thing for us, a benefit for us we weigh in on. And the last one is we're moving towards achieve our 2030 climate action commitment. Some of our responsibilities as an owner, really, when you get a green roof, you have to really take good care of it up front. It's kind of nurturing a child up front. There's a lot of energy up front, and then it kind of spills off. First year, make sure it's watered, make sure it's weeded. And get up there, look at it, make sure the system's running properly as it was designed. I think that's very important. Check for wilting, that's the whole bit, really look at it. Secondly, you want to remove any debris from the drains. Make sure you don't have our guys are up there constantly looking at different drains and looking at roof leaks. You're constantly getting called in different areas of the older part of the university. In fact, you have a roof asset management program that basically runs 20 years. So you keep cycling through. You do one, 20 years later, you're doing it again. So if we can have more green roofs, we might be able to expand or increase that amount of time we have to actually do those roofs. Fertilizing and weeding. Daryl said he fertilizes once a year on this, and he does, again, periodically go up there and have his crews weeding roof area. And then, as I should, some green roofs happen on the roof. It's actually a spot on campus, but I can't tell you what building. I'm taking care of it, but it is kind of funny. If you let nature go, that's what it'll do. So, like I said, real brief. If there's any questions as an owner, I've only been there 4 years, but from what I can see, most of our green roofs are relatively new. The oldest one is 10 years old, and that's doing well. So I would say, don't be afraid. Just go in and do it.
So Chris, like on average, you've maintained many buildings on campus and the grounds and so forth. Bigger pain to take care of a vegetated roof than grounds, or, you know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't call it a pain. There is more effort involved in it because you have to go up there and make sure that the plants are doing well. But I think in the long run, if you can extend your life of your roof, I think that pain is mitigated. But the cost of having someone go up there and look at it and take care of it versus put a new roof on in 20 years, maybe you can extend it to 30 to 40, I think that's a good story.
And probably not more trouble than that kind of garden on the ground.
No, and actually, it might get them up there, when they should be up there instead of having this. Because it's forgotten. That was an old mechanical well that people forgot about.
Great. Any questions?
Chris, in terms of leaks, what are the failure modes? What causes the leaks? I know there's probably more than one.
Okay, so
What are the failure modes?
most of the time, the failure is around the flashing. If the membrane's old, freeze thaw is brutal. The UV degradation to a roof, you have that's killer. I mean, you can protect it and have a sacrificial layer, which a green roof kind of is, and you can really extend your life. So I would say flashing details. I don't want to say poor installation because sometimes it's just the age of a roof, but usually gets us around the parapets. That's what gets us the most. The vertical joints. We have a lot of old masonry buildings, and we have a lot of vertical joints, so the leaks come within, and then you don't know where that water's coming in. They think it's coming in the center of the roof, but it's really coming in the parapet. So water is a strange thing. It's not an architect's friend. So, other questions back there?
Yeah, you had a little bullet about energy. So do you have any stats on, let's say, energy cost in the buildings that you have green roofs, right? Have you been able to do any metrics that
Well, it's hard because you got to A-B it. And we have so many different building types on campus. To say this one is more energy efficient than this would be hard because they don't have the same anatomy, if you will. So we haven't done that. I think what we could do is, and we haven't done this, is take a roof that wasn't a green roof and install one. So do a 3-year study, check the energy out. Don't touch the rest of the building. That would ruin the whole analysis. But just change the roof out, and then analyze after 3 years, and then do that comparison. But we haven't done that. It might be a great experiment to do. Maybe one of the professors get on that.
So I can tell you, in a past life, I worked for a company who put a vegetated roof on, and I don't remember the statistics, but we reduced our cooling load significantly just because of the vegetated roof, and we did that analysis, actual data, before we put the roof on and after we put the vegetated roof on was significant.
Ron?
I just wanted to say, as a structural engineer, the loading of the trays is very interesting to me because in Cleveland, the load required for flat roofs is 30 pounds per square foot. So knowing that, it's because of snow, well, if you take the trays off every fall, it should be a pain. You could do that and trade off and then let the snow load come in the wintertime, but you could not have both. So just a point to keep in mind.
Yep.
We don't like when roofs collapse, so we try to.
I was just curious more about the weeding. Are you hand weeding all of that? And then
They're hand
if you
weeding.
have a tray system, you're not supposed to step on the trays, so then how do you weed?
They're a little more forgiving.
Yeah,
You know,
after
you
you
actually-
did installation.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
After they really have established, you can walk on their weeds. They're basically like lawn. So they have a little bit more forgiveness to them. So you have to go in there and weed them. We don't recommend using, you know, any type of herbicides. I think it would kill them, really, what happened. No, I think so. Yeah.
Can't do it.
You can't do it, that's what I'm saying.
Hand weed?
And weed. But it fills in quickly. So, like I said, we would be hearing it from Daryl if he thought it was a bad thing.
He mentioned the maximum load of the roofs can bear. Is that what you're having to do, is remove those trays in the fall?
No. He was just saying in general, if we were planning to do this to a building, or one of our existing buildings, he'd say you have to check the roof loads, which we would.
You should do that no matter what.
Right.
That's
Well, on a new building, it's designed for it.
correct. But an existing building, yeah, you can't just go up and say, I want a green roof and put a foot of soil up there, you're in trouble.
Okay.
No, yeah, right.
But just to be clear, the growing media they're using is not as heavy as dirt. It's a very lightweight material, which is why Craig passed around that little sample.
And the haydite we're going to be using more of is extremely light, and that's one of the reasons we're using it.
Great.
To answer the question on the weeding, and the other question about maintenance, I maintain one for the Cleveland Clinic, so we actually walk right over the top of it, so we hand weed, but I also put down an application of snapshot every spring that controls that, and I fertilize it once a year, and it's actually easier than outside bed. The problem is it's out of sight and out of mind. So if you're not walking by it every day, you just don't really realize it's up there.
Right.
But it's very, very easy. You walk over, you run the mower over if you have to. We've had ours for 5 years, I've never had to cut it.
Yeah.
But I did have an issue with cottonwood trees coming up through it the first year and some other type of fireweed that was popping up it. But it's under control. One application, snapshot once a year, and you're in good shape.
And you're good. Yeah, like I said, Daryl's didn't have a problem with it. It's been pretty good. They got up there and really regressed it that first year, which is very important, is to really maintain it that first year, get it established, and then it'll perform for you. So I think we were pretty.
You also need to check about the 4th or 5th year, do a soil test, because you will have some pH factors that will start affecting the sedums. Some of the sedums will start getting weaker just because the pH ranges.
So, yeah, we'll lose some of this stuff. Nutrition, right?
Anything else?
I have a question. I don't know if it's a question that you can answer, but it involves what we're discussing right now. So as an organic farmer and gardener, and now owner of a rooftop garden, or caretaker of the rooftop garden, Angie's Garden on top of University, I'm exploring organic ways, of fertilizing this. Like my normal way of maintaining the soil would be to amend it, with some sort of natural compost. So I'm in this new type of space where we have the, concern about weight, and so adding a lot of organic materials. I don't know if that's,
So you're saying taking pulper, taking stuff from like that type of organic matter?
I'm kind of looking at how, we probably have this hadite, that's probably what we have up there. So I'm just kind of thinking, how can I maintain this without chemicals?
Todd Hauser's here somewhere. I don't know where you're at. Todd, Todd, they're asking about the organics. If you got to add more organics
like with haydite?
Yeah, I prefer not to be using a chemical fertilizer. I want to be chemical free in my space. So I'm just wondering how to maintain that soil in an organic way. It's going to be different than what I would do on the ground in a garden where I'd be adding manure and compost.
Right.
Any suggestions?
Stabilized compost.
Stabilized compost?
Yeah, carbon to nitrogen ratio, say in the mid-20s to 1, carbon to nitrogen. So it's not quick sugar for the microbes, but it's also not so high in the carbon that they actually can mineralize it and get the nutrition. And then if you know pH is an issue, you can balance the pH because our composts tend to be a little bit higher, say above neutral, say 7.5 plus. You can balance that with pine bark fines. And I say fines because you actually want pine bark that is actually not the chunk pine bark. And that'll give you a pH below, say 5, so you can stabilize that pH. But you can have your balanced nutrition with your compost, which will give you a mid-20s to 1 on carbon nitrogen ratio. I'll be happy to give you some more information on that, but I like the organic side of it too, as opposed to put more. Maintenance fertilization is necessary in a lot of cases, but we can tend to minimize that with the proper balanced diet of carbon material.
Great. Can you tell me your name in case I have to
Todd Hauser. Todd Hauser, yeah. Yeah, Todd Hauser. I actually work for Haydite.
Okay.
You can run my operation. Yep.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.
Do we still use fish food
Sure.
to fertilize rooftop gardens? I know that's a very lightweight material.
The problem with that is that the length that it lasts is an issue. So if you're going to keep it organically, it'll be great. You're going to be putting it on probably every 8 to 9 to 10 weeks. Whereas if you use a slow release fertilizer, it's synthetically made, but it lasts the entire growing season.
Just another organic option, right? Okay. Chris, thank you.
Wrap up the morning speakers. It's been really nice to have all of this great detail. And I've got, I do these in 40-minute segments, so I just cracked 40 minutes into 20. So ready for the fire hose is coming out. To me, this is kind of a little bit of a coming out party. I've studied vegetated root systems for almost 20 years under the radar here in Cleveland. I think it's important to have this conversation locally. We had a small symposium last August that had about 60 people on green roofs, and I think we need to build this momentum about the conversation of how we're going to begin to include living architecture more commonly into our buildings in Cleveland. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how vegetated root systems are really your first step in a prefix menu that is coming down the pipe on living architecture. At the end of this century, buildings are going to change dramatically. Because you guys already know this, you're performance people, you're already into the way in which a building is going to provide something. So what the building is providing is not just a place to live, it's all these other benefits that we get from it. So I'm going to challenge us in the room. We can commission, design, install, and maintain and steward these vegetated systems. And I think each of us can do one of these by 2030. That's an easy goal. So the reason that this kind of movement towards living architecture is happening is because we've created cities that are essentially built of a geology. They're brick, stone, mortar, glass, and steel. We don't want to live in these cities any longer. Humans are moving throughout the globe and they're finding places that are not built of these materials, but that have living components to them. And cities are changing dramatically. Green roof trending is showing this desire to be around living things. These are a little bit small, but national trends these are global trends, and the market's shifting a little bit away from Europe. Europe's still a huge market, it's by far the biggest market. We're beginning to see North American and Asian markets beginning to take off, and as this slide at the bottom is cumulative meters squared of roofs, so 150 million cubic meters squared In the US, we're doing okay here in North America. US and Canada, about 4 million square feet of green roofing was installed last year. This is out of a couple of major market sectors. I like the maps better than the graphs, but you guys get both here. These kind of concentrated places, Toronto, Chicago, Washington, DC, and then Seattle over here. New York will be coming online strong and quickly soon. That's at a 10% growth rate over 2015. Double-digit figures almost always for vegetated roof systems, as you can imagine, particularly in North America. So it's just a growing component of our infrastructure. Most of the stuff that's been driving those markets has had a big impact in relationship to policy. So most of those communities have some form of vegetated roof system policy. And we're very fortunate that we started here in Cleveland with a stormwater fee program that has been on and again and off again. It's now back, it's here permanently for impervious cover. So, was there somebody here from the sewer district? Oh, okay. I might see your name somewhere. So they may be able to answer a few detailed questions about this at the end, the credits that are associated with it. This is the beginnings, I think, for vegetated roof systems. We shouldn't design vegetated roof systems just for this policy, though, because we'd end up with only stormwater roofs, and that's not really what roofs do well. They do that well, but they do other things equally good, equally well. The reasons really that living architecture and vegetated roof systems are becoming popular and actually have seen the success is that they have both a rational logic that's being applied to them and a non-rational logic. The reality is that they do provide a suite of ecosystem services, but they also talk about our love of nature. So I'm listed here kind of the way a vegetated roof system provides a set of ecosystem services. If you're not familiar with that term, I hope you are, but if you're not, it's essentially the idea that if you construct an ecosystem by its structure, it will provide a function. It doesn't matter what that function is. We interpret that function as a service. So if it cools and intercepts solar radiation and turns that into a distributed form of carbon, if it intercepts solar radiation, we see that as a benefit. It's just the ecosystem doing its thing. Well, you guys have done a great job kind of listing a lot of these. We have a lot of papers in the academic position over the last 30 years now in the English language over all of these, what we call suites of services. And this is just a big graph of what I call a utopian green roof. When you start a design project, everything gets put on the green roof. Let's put that on there, let's put that on there, let's put it all on there. And it's going to provide all of these ecosystem services. And that's a bit unrealistic. What we're learning is that these ecosystem services have certain signatures, or these roofs have certain signatures, in which some ecosystem services, some benefits are kind of targeted around the design of the structure of the roof and then maintained that way. We call these kind of trade-offs. You essentially can gain one area of performance and maybe lose some in another area. That's just reality, right? So in this case, a trade-off might be around aesthetics and order, a beautiful place, and you can gain that service by adding more nitrogen fertilizers to it, but you lose your nutrient retention of the roof. The roof becomes a little bit of a source of some of the nutrients leaving the system. This gives us an opportunity to start to look at signatures of these roofs. What this means for you guys as designers, constructors, and maintainers is that you could essentially start to have priorities in the project. Don't let them do everything. Let them do a couple of things really well. So vegetated roof systems have appealed to this logic, and this is where almost all the policy comes from. Stormwater retention is the big one. Stormwater quality and nutrient retention, that's the second one. Energy, that's the third one. And habitat is the fourth one. Not as prevalent in North America yet. The other thing that's really making this work is it's green. You know, you hear it. We essentially want to be near nature, and we continue to build cities that are not. Don't underestimate this. as a part of your maintenance, your design. This is really the undercurrent of what I think 21st century cities will have. Harder to talk about this sometimes, so I'm just going to move that right on into 3 advancements. The vegetated roof systems have really kind of made, Cindy asked me, can you hear me back there? Okay. Cindy asked me to talk about kind of global and national trends. I thought, well, I'll just talk about a couple of advancements. Some you've probably heard of, and I know a couple you haven't heard of. And what we're really doing in North America to advance the field of green roofs and vegetated roof systems. So you're already familiar with the idea of kind of a sedum extensive roof. And sedum extensive roofs were basically designed around the main goal of stormwater. This came out of Germany over the last half century. Germany developed these technologies. They're fantastic. We've imported them. That's a lot of what we've talked about. The advanced substrates with liquid aggregates and so forth that are part of them. This project became the world's largest extensive sedum roof, fully purchased from Germany, basically, and imported. Even the soils are imported into the Ford assembly plant in Dearborn. Are you familiar with this roof? So I got to study this roof a little bit. It's very interesting. 25 acres on this roof. It was designed around stormwater compliance, and then Ford really realized there was an advantage on profit motive for them, operational costs associated with solar interception. A lot of that stuff is happening with cooling costs because the plants just intercept light. They like it. They don't have to get rid of it. They use it. They convert it to sugar. So it's a really interesting component. They were like, well, these two things partner really well with the sedum extensive roof, and these two ecosystem services work well for us as an organization. So they began to select those as goals. One of the things I thought I'd mention, though, is if you look at this roof, it has some irrigation heads, which we've talked about. It's actually a very uniform, continuous sedum mats that were actually put up. It's very robust. It's actually very healthy. So it is actually getting that fertilization and weeding that we talked about. That makes it an aesthetic roof. It's nice to look at. So Ford actually folded that into their kind of goals for the design and installation and maintenance and stewardship of the roof under an education mission where people can actually go. You can't walk on the roof, but you can at least see it. They built a tower. So they really believe in it. They built a tower that actually overlooks the roof. The German technologies are really quite fantastic. When you think about green roofs, this is oftentimes what we think about, the sedum extensive roof. What happens when that sedum extensive roof fails? And not just the waterproofing member. We've already talked about that. Well, we can go to the Swiss and find out a little bit about that history. The Swiss actually purchased the German technologies throughout the 80s and 90s, put a lot of roofs out, and then created a policy where you couldn't fertilize an herbicide in their local jurisdictions. Whoops. Or maybe okay. What they had was a goal of stormwater energy as they were purchasing the roofs and that technology. Their friends, they're Germans, speaking German that day, speaking French the next day. The Swiss won't tell you the story because they're Swiss. They're quiet. They don't say anything. But it's an interesting story because what happens is you see these plants. These are the exact same plants on Ford, pretty much. Some species have died because they haven't gotten fertilization. Others are a little bit smaller. You begin to see patches. Somebody might say, that roof's not working. It depends on the ecosystem services that you hope to provide in your roof. They started to make lemonade here. Right? They got lemons. They started to make lemonade by asking the question, what other ecosystem services is happening there? Well, biodiversity is happening because lots of plants are coming in and they're taking off. We call them weeds, but some of them are actually native plants. And then they actually looked back at some of their historic precedents and really took a different turn in the world. They went back to this roof. Is anyone familiar with this roof? The Moose Lake Water Plant? Other than my students who are raising their hands. The Moose Lake Water Plant was created in, wait for it, 1914. So it's over 100 years old and actually was a very simple roof designed around the goal of energy. So it's a one-story building that actually treats the potable water for Zurich. So it's a water treatment plant, it's drinking water. And then what they did was they created a concrete one-story building and they just took the the soils and put it right up on the roof. So these soils that are shown here on the right-hand side are actually just topsoil from an ecosystem that is no longer really in Zurich or even in Switzerland. It's a wet meadow ecosystem. So ultimately, over time, in addition to providing the energy service, it was creating this very unique biodiversity service, to the point that these plants, most of these plants on this roof, many of them are threatened and endangered. So this purple orchid morii is no longer found in Switzerland anywhere except this roof. So their values begin to change around some of these precedents and the thing that maybe these roofs can do more than just stormwater and energy. They've really become pioneers in biodiversity. They've come back to projects like this and said, what can we do? How can we make partners? How can we couple biodiversity or maximize biodiversity with other ecosystem services? So they look at photovoltaics. The Germans had already told them, they're more efficient if you put the PV panels onto your green roof. You can increase up to about 2% efficiency in the PV system through transmission, right? The green roof keeps it cool, so you use less energy in your transmission. They began playing around with them, moving them up and down. This is an early stage. But they also found out that it increases biodiversity, a mutualism, a symbiosis, if you will. By creating greater plant diversity, you create greater insect diversity, and that's because of the shading that the panels provide. So they kind of had this mission, and they kept going. They have a lot of artwork that they have laid into their roofs. I have a paper I can share with you that I wrote a number of years ago that's related to art. All of the art that goes on the roofs has to have a biodiversity goal. It has to be a nesting component, or it has to have some part of the wildlife habitat. When I visited the Expo Center, they didn't have this installation on it. So this is not Photoshop, but it does actually look like that. The wood actually creates nesting sites and then decomposes to return a carbon component to the roof. Do they compromise stormwater and energy as these roofs have different influences? A little bit. When I asked them, they kind of dodged the question a little bit, but I do think that the roofs still are providing some of those services. What they do is they switch out of some energy solar gains, and they're actually creating energy with their photovoltaics. Okay, what is the U.S. doing? What's our contribution to this major field? Currently, we're talking about prairies. Sedums come from the high mountains. They're an alpine plant that is called a stress tolerator. They'll tolerate anything. They're not necessarily the most productive plant, but they can tolerate just about any condition. But we don't have them everywhere in North America, and we have a lot of prairies. Our prairie systems are very diverse, and we even have prairies that grow right on limestone. So we're looking at those systems as researchers, and they're pretty much being explored everywhere from Texas to Rome. It's the major thing that the U.S. is contributing to. So this is Texas, this is Nebraska. Nebraska's got a research center. Almost every major university does, and they're related. A lot of them are related to this. This is Oklahoma. Texas has a huge one called the Brit Center. This is Chicago. I thought I'd bring it back to the Great Lakes. This is actually publicly accessible. If you're in Chicago, go to Chicago Botanic Gardens, go to the research building, and then go up on top of this. It's really a fantastic one. The Chicago Botanic Gardens will probably roll out a series of seeds, and they already have their first publications on prairie plants that they seem to be testing and having early results on. It won't just be the plants, I think, that I hope North America contributes to. Is there another ecosystem service that roofs provide? And can we break open a knowledge piece that's really related to architecture and the way in which we want to live as people, not just plants? So I hope there's a bigger goal that North America can contribute. Those things contribute to what I think is a city that you will be, well, our kids will be living in parts of these. You've seen these images before, probably, particularly if you're in the design field, that seem kind of easy to render and hard to pull off, but the reality is they're coming out every day so much faster than I've ever seen them over the last 20 years. And the reality is they're not in places that are just eco-fuzzy. This is Amsterdam's financial district. They're in Paris hotels. They're in Sao Paulo eco-resorts. And they're being constructed like this. I can't really even keep up with these almost anymore. This is just an example of the way in which architecture is coming up with new organizations in this facade, for instance. It looks kind of weird, doesn't it? You look at this and you're like, oh my God, I didn't want to go in there. And then once you're in there, okay, I want to go in there. It's an eco-resort. It's actually basically using vegetation to kind of wrap or cloak a building. In this case, Sao Paulo is heavily populated but doesn't have as much vegetation as you might imagine. And so they're utilizing it as a kind of ameliorative view of the urban condition. We've seen this across every continent. This is Sydney, project Jean Nobel and Patrick Blanc. And they're even nearby here. They don't necessarily, you don't even necessarily have to have living architecture on the outside of it. You can actually have it incorporated within your building. I thought this was interesting. Does anyone know 60 Richmond? I'm new to this building. I'm hoping to see it in spring. I'm going to be in Toronto. But green roofs here, water, light comes in. They're the first level of defense, really the beginnings of living architecture. Cistern storage, it comes down, filters, and is used for irrigation in an interior green wall courtyard. There's yet another roof on a pedestal building that creates produce that actually is used in a restaurant, compost, goes into that culinary garden. These kinds of links and loops are what living architecture is really going to be about, but you've got to have the plants. The plants are part of that system, a really important part of an urban ecology. I think this project was a kind of threshold project that recently opened in 2015. Hopefully you're familiar with this project in Milan called Bosco Verticale. Received a lot of criticism on the web. That they're basically growing a forest on the outside of two skyscrapers, well, not really too tall, 26 and 18-story buildings. But they won the Tall Building Award nationally or internationally last year, usually in the way of engineering feats of marbling skyscrapers. But what we're really talking about is Boreai basically he used ecosystem services, like it's going to cool everything, it's going to create all the stuff and use more. But really, when I visited the project, I mean, it's good at that, probably okay at ecosystem services, phenomenal at biophilia. This is the interior. It's a little dark. I should have lightened these a little bit. I'm standing in a 20th story looking out on the right of the living room terrace, and on the left is kind of a kitchen terrace. This is where your kitchen table would be. And what you're really doing is you're using these kind of raptures on the facade to basically relate to almost a social ecology. This tree is not your tree. It's actually growing in your downstairs neighbor's terrace. Your tree is actually growing up to your upstairs neighbor's terrace. So there becomes this thing where if you went and lived in the suburbs, you walk on your fence and you ask, hey, you got a spot in your lawn? I got a spot here, what did you do? And it creates a social ecology that's uncommon in urban dwelling. That's actually beginning to happen on these terraces. And I've never seen anything quite like it. It's a way of kind of being a part of the urban setting. And this photo on the left is probably my most interesting shot of there that captures the experience. I love this bank building. It's a glorious architecture. I don't know that I want to look at it all the time. And the relationship of this foreground vegetation gives me a healing quality or a feeling that's really much more private, much more secure. And I can actually watch the traffic. Can you imagine this? I've never seen this anywhere. Looking through a garden and the sky to find out if the traffic patterns in this, instead of looking at my phone. This image is very telling, I think, of Milan, which has been a city of innovation, science, art, and design for thousands of years. And that's the old city in the background. The future is here. If you walk around Milan, you can begin to feel this happening. It's not just buildings. It's big-time urban areas. So this is, you see these all the time. You see these about China, Dubai. Sejong City is actually under construction. This is a big, very large municipal center here in the middle. You see these cross-grade buildings that have linear organizations around a city of towers, or a ring of towers. The city began construction in 2016. It's moving 30 of its major agencies and bureaucracies out of Seoul missile range from North Korea. They also need to just redistribute their population out of Seoul. Seoul's very large and they're very sparse in the other cities. So this is about, you can kind of see the building here, you can watch it on Google. It changes about every 6 months. That's the first building, the larger municipal building. There'll be other ones like that. These are the towers. It's representative of a set of ethics that I think are changing worldwide in our global understanding of one another. If we built Washington, D.C., I tell my students, remember, this is Washington, D.C. It was a capital of a democratic capitalist community. That's what's happening here. We had pure geometries with hard lines and axes to show kind of power and structure. This is kind of the future, possibly. These linear organizations that show context and resilience. Now, you know, they're doing a lot of parks and gardens on the architecture, but you can begin to see the way in which buildings are going to change a lot, and the demand for living walls, living roofs, and things we haven't even created yet will be coming. All right, so I've got a little section on getting help after this, but this is my last slide on roofs and walls here. So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to go back to that challenge. Think about what you're doing in your work and figuring out how you can get vegetated roofs started. Because if you haven't started those, this rest of this stuff is already coming down the pipe at us. And I think in Cleveland, we can work together. I'm going to take on the effort. If you're interested, please give me your business card. We will figure out a way to keep the conversation of vegetated roof systems going here in Cleveland. I'm not sure how to do that yet. That's not really what I wanted to do in my career, but I'll help us do it. We will get there. And we can get there. The Tower of Medici, 1400, in Lucca, Italy, down the road in Milan, was built last year. Okay, so just a few things about getting help. You can find me in our lab at medlab.org or Kent State. We do a number of things. We do research projects, mainly. This is us looking at some dredge, turning dredge into lightweight aggregate. So Cuyahoga River dredge, no one wants to play. We'll take it if we want. We'll turn it into lightweight aggregate. And we're doing that now with the Maumee. We're beginning to look at that opportunity. We look at plants a lot. Our students look at various things. Native plants, of course, we know grow in vegetated roofs. This is a threatened endangered species in Ohio. This is a violet that is I think it's technically threatened. We're looking at a couple of other species that are even better than this one to reintroduce into vegetated roof systems. It's all about them as much as possible, so if you do call, it won't be a quick response. We're on the academic counter. And they're learning, so be patient. This is kind of what we do because we're in college of architecture. We do a lot of innovation or visualization, conceptualization. That's kind of what we're learning to do. And so we're a teaching group out of that lab. We do function with a lot of other faculty in various ways. Just to be brief, if you're not a member, I know we're from USGBC, if you're not a member of Dreamers for Healthy Cities, join. I used to say, think about joining. Now, just join. Toronto's not far from here. That's where they're headquartered. They run the North American group for the industry and trade. The websites are fantastic now. There's a lot of resources, things like Green Safe Calculator comes on. I know everyone wants to know you can calculate these roofs out, A&E, value engineering, and stuff like that. Join as a member. You get access to this calculator. There are some free calculators on energy. So even if you don't join, you can go there and do the energy calculations. These are all updated with our academic work. Okay, so we load all this in, somebody converts it, and they create these calculators. This is their punch slide. They sent this to me. So these are their conferences. We have a big one in Seattle this fall. In the spring, this one's in Toronto. It's right up the road. It's fantastic. So those are the kind of things you can get access to as a member. You get the Living Architecture Monitor, which is quarterly, keeps you in the loop, tells you what's going on. It's all the hints from maintenance to installation to planning. This is our journal, the academic volume. You can access it openly online. You don't have to be a member of that for that. If you'd like to put yourself to sleep, you can read the first parts of those and then the statistics and everything else. There's huge bibliographies as well.